Hi everyone and welcome along. Today we are going to be diving into my first book, New Botanical Painting, and having a go at painting the Hydrangea project. So grab your paints and let's get started. So for those of you who already have a copy of my book, New Botanical Painting, the project we're looking at is on page 46-47. This is also a really good time to point out that I have different sort of foreign language versions of this book, but there is a version in English but for America called Painting Watercolour Botanicals, and it's got a pink cover, but it is exactly the same book on the inside. So it's one of the quirks of publishing around the world. Sometimes your book has a different cover and a different title, but this is the project we're going to be looking at. And if you don't have the book, well, this is the point of the tutorial, is I want to give you a little sort of insight into the projects in the book to see if you enjoy them, and maybe you might then want to go buy the book and fill your life with all the other tutorials in it. So we start off with a little pencil drawing of just a line for the stem, and then a sort of circle, oval, sort of slightly squashed circle shape to create the shape where we're going to put our hydrangea petals. It's really helpful to have that guide just so we don't go off in all directions. In the book, I recommend a size 0 brush, a size 2 and a size 8. I seem to have picked up a 3/10 brush, but essentially what you need is a large, a medium and a small one for detail. And what I love about this project is it just uses 3 colours. So we've got Sap Green, and then Prussian Blue and Cadmium Yellow up there. Of course, hydrangeas come in all sorts of different colour schemes, so once you've had a go at this one, then you can feel free to apply the techniques you've learnt in the project to all sorts of different colourways. So I always like to begin my projects by waking up my paints, and what that means is I'm just adding water to them and getting the paint on the surface just nice and ready to go. So the way we start this project is I'm actually going to just change my water over. I always like to have 2 jars of water ready to go, just so the water stays clean as long as possible. So we're going to begin by painting petals into the hydrangea here, and what we use is a very diluted sap green, and we're using the size 2 brush, and we're going to paint petals, and I'm creating them by almost sort of making a sort of spade shape. Spade as in pack of cards spade. Then just filling it in and doing a pair of these petals. Really not too much colour at all. They want to be nice and wet, nice and dilute. And then I'm just going to drop in a little bit of Prussian Blue into each one. So I'm going to now start to fill up this shape with these little petals, these pairs of petals. And each time I've done a pair, then I add the blue. Getting that blend right is all about timing. If you painted up a load of pairs of petals and then suddenly was like, oh, now I'm going to fill in the blue for all of them, you would find that your green petals would have dried. So the idea is we're trying to fill up, I'd sort of, I guess, fill it up to about half capacity. And what I mean by that is sort of, so you've got petals everywhere, but there's quite a lot of gaps around the edge, because this is a controlled loose project, meaning that we are going to make the most of the lovely crisp dried edges of these petals that you can start to see. There's a lovely one there, which only comes if you use a very diluted amount of colour and a decent amount of water. So as I fill up my hydrangea with petals, we're obviously going to come to the edges of the circle, and to create a sense that this is a spherical shape rather than just a flat round shape, what we can do is slightly angle and squash the shape of our petals. So you can see here what I'm going to do is just do one that's really squished. So I'm just going to fill up the rest of this circle to a sort of, like I say, half full stage, and you'll see what I mean by that in a second. So you can see what I mean, but it's now sort of got a general coverage of fullness, but there's loads of gaps in between. These are all pretty much dry now, so that means we can move on to adding in 2 more petals to each flower. In the book, I recommend moving on to a smaller brush for a bit more control. So I'm going to just now carry on. I might need to mix up a little bit more paint. So I'm going back in and painting in the remaining petals. Now this point, the reason we need a bit more control is we're going to come up against flowers quite close up to the previous ones, so you might not be able to paint in a full petal every time. Also, when using a smaller brush, you are more likely to put less water onto the page, so you should start adding your blue tips to the petals after each one rather than after painting each pair. And by doing this second round of petals, you will fill far more of your circle to the point where we'll probably only have very little gaps to just put in a few little dabs of petal colour. We've now got a much fuller hydrangea, but we have still got some unpainted space. So what we can do now is just go round and put in some loose petal shapes that are just filling up the gaps, but don't worry about, you know, the odd bit of unpainted space. That's absolutely fine. And keep sort of the odd little bit of petal poking out of the edge of this circle, just to make sure it doesn't look too perfectly smooth by the end, because that is the sort of the giveaway, but it's not a very organic shape if you're not careful. So we're just going to fill up the shape, and then all we need to do is finish off with the stem and a leaf. So just finishing up, filling in the gaps. It's a really fun thing to be able to revisit some of these projects from New Botanical Painting. I brought out the book long before I had a YouTube channel, and so I used to do a few filmed paint-alongs on my Instagram stories, but nothing quite like this. I've loved hearing all your stories about how you've enjoyed the book and how in current times it's been a real help to keeping you sort of occupied and to keep your brains happy during lockdown. But what's also rather nice is it's just nice to look back at where everything really began for me on the eve of the new book coming out, Birds, Bees and Blossoms, on October the 7th, 2021. So that's coming up in a few weeks. Time of filming, we're in September 2021. And what I'm currently doing over on my Patreon is we are releasing a few filmed tutorials from that book exclusively for my patrons. So if you would love to see a sneak peek, but also a filmed tutorial version of the book project, then you can find all the information and details to sign up to my Patreon. Anyway, back to the hydrangea. So you can see here that filling in those little gaps makes a beautifully full and rounded hydrangea. So we just need to paint in the stem and a leaf or two. So I have got my Sap Green, and then we need the Cadmium Yellow, which we haven't yet used. So I'm just going to mix those two together. Maybe a little bit more green. That went rather yellow. Cadmium Yellow is a really strong yellow. The word cadmium is a sign that it's quite an opaque and overpowering colour. Okay, that's really nice. So in the book it says paint the stem and parallel leaf branches in base mix, which is what we call this Sap Green and Cadmium Yellow mixture. So size 2 brush, which seems to be the perfect size for a slightly broad hydrangea stem, and then 2 branches just using the tip of the brush, and then with your size 8 brush we're going to create the leaves. And I'm going to get a bit more Sap Green in there, and I'm going to just use the full body of the brush to create the broad leaves. And then using my little brush whilst it's still wet, I mean, you could use the fine point of your larger brush if you are feeling confident with the control. And then for this one we're just going to do a leaf that's sort of tipped over on the side. So I'm just pushing the paint that's already on the page with my wet brush. And then we need some sepals coming out from underneath the flower, so we can just use the size 2 brush, and then the same technique and there you have your hydrangea project, fresh out of new Botanical Painting. And there's plenty more projects just like that in the book, which you can find links to buy in the episode notes. Thanks so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed that, and I hope it gave you a little insight into this book, New Botanical Painting. It is something I'm extremely proud of. It's got over 30 flower and foliage projects, and also some lovely composition projects at the back to turn all your flower paintings into beautiful arrangements, cards and stationery. If you want to get your hands on a copy, you can find all the details in the episode notes below. I want to say a massive thank you to my patrons for their support, because that support enables me to keep creating these videos that everyone can enjoy. And if you enjoyed it, then hit the like button below and comment to let me know how you're getting on. And of course, if you subscribe, then you'll never miss another video. Until next time, bye!